The roar of motorcycles echoed through the streets of downtown Phoenix, the asphalt shaking beneath the tires of a rowdy gang of bikers. The Devil's Rangers, a notorious club with a reputation for chaos, violence, and lawlessness, ruled the city's underground, their leader, Rocco "Dagger" Milana, hulking figure with tattoos covering his arms, glared through his black aviator sunglasses as they sped down the crowded city block. For years they'd owned the streets, but today they had made a mistake, one that would cost them dearly. Inside the Urban Security Unit USU, the men and women in black tactical gear moved like a well-oiled machine. The USU, a private military organization contracted by local and federal governments to handle the worst of urban violence, prided itself on its efficiency and discretion. They didn't just fight crime, they eradicated it. Jack "Ghost" Harris sat at a desk scrolling through a tablet. His uniform, perfectly pressed, bore the USU insignia at 62. And in his mid-30s, Ghost had the look of someone who had seen too much and was determined not to let it break him. His reputation within the USU was legendary: silent, effective, and when necessary, lethal. He wasn't someone you crossed. The door to the operations room swung open with a soft hiss, and his colleague Kelsey "Viper" Martinez walked in. She was a sniper, calm under pressure, precise in her execution. Her dark eyes locked onto Ghost as she tossed a file onto his desk. "You might want to take a look at this," she said, her voice steady but urgent. Ghost raised an eyebrow, scanning the file. A picture of Rocco "Dagger" Malone grinned up at him below. It was a list of charges: assault, robbery, drug trafficking, and a dozen more that could fill a book. But it wasn't the charges that caught Ghost's attention. It was the location: an abandoned warehouse just outside the city, a known hotspot for biker activity. "They've got something big planned," Ghost muttered, his fingers tapping the edge of the file. "We need to hit them before it goes down." "We're not the only ones watching," Viper added. "They've been moving weapons. A lot of them." Ghost stood up, grabbing his gear and nodding to Viper. "Get the team ready. We hit them in 10. Meanwhile, the Devil's Rangers were setting up their operation inside the rundown warehouse. Rocco stood at the center, surveying the stacks of firearms and boxes of ammunition. His club wasn't just about drugs and violence anymore. It was about becoming the city's most powerful criminal empire. They had already bribed half the local law enforcement. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for. The USU Rocco's lieutenant, a wiry man named Jax, walked up to him. "We're ready to move," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The trucks are loaded. We take it all tonight." Boss Rocco grinned, a cruel smirk that sent a chill down Jax's spine. "Tonight is the night we show Phoenix who runs this town. No one's gonna mess with us." But as Rocco spoke, he heard the low hum of a Black Hawk helicopter overhead. He froze, his eyes narrowing. The sound wasn't normal for the neighborhood. He walked to the door of the warehouse and looked up just in time to see a shadow pass overhead. His heart skipped a beat. "USU," Rocco growled under his breath. They were here minutes later. The Devil's Rangers found themselves surrounded. The Humvees rolled in silently, soldiers dressed in tactical gear storming the warehouse, their weapons trained on the bikers. It was a trap, and the bikers had walked right into it. Ghost led the charge, his face a mask of calm professionalism. "Weapons down, surrender now, and we'll make it easy on you," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. Rocco's grip tightened on his handgun. But he knew better than to fight. The USU didn't lose. He raised his hand slightly, signaling his men to lower their weapons. But his eyes were sharp. "You think you can just walk in here and take us down?" he snarled. Ghost's gaze never wavered. "You've been warned too many times, Rocco. This ends tonight." Inside the chaos, a scuffle broke out. Jax lunged at one of the soldiers, a knife glinting in his hand. A second later, his body hit the ground, a bullet hole in his chest. Rocco's eyes flickered in disbelief. His gang wasn't supposed to die like this. Not in a clean, efficient manner. He was used to the chaos, the mess, But the USU was different. The soldiers moved like shadows. Silent and deadly Ghost reached Rocco. First, he grabbed the biker leader by the collar and shoved him against a stack of crates. "You've been running this town for too long," Ghost said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now you answer to someone else." Rocco spat blood onto the floor. "You think you're the first to try and take me down. Ivy survived worse than you." "You're right about one thing," Ghost said, his tone colder now. "You've survived, but not for long." As the USU soldiers rounded up the remaining bikers, securing them in handcuffs, Ghost turned to Viper. "Get them to the holding cells. I'll be with you in a minute." She nodded, her face grim. As she led the prisoners away, Ghost lingered, staring down at Rocco, who was seething in rage. Ghost kneeled in front of him, his eyes never leaving Rocco's. "I don't want to see you or your gang in this city again. If I do, I'll finish what I started. Understand?" Rocco said nothing, his defiance still strong, but it was clear he knew he was beaten. Ghost stood up, brushing the dirt off his pants. "Good. We'll see each other again soon, Rocco. But next time, it won't be so easy." With that, Ghost turned and walked out, leaving the Devil's Rangers to be hauled off to their fates. Outside, the Black Hawk helicopter was already lifting off, the sound of its blades a reminder of the USU's dominance the next morning. The sun rose over the city, but for Rocco and his gang, it was a new day of reckoning. The streets were quieter now, the fear of the USU settling into the cracks of the city's criminal underworld. And for Ghost, it was just another day at work, another victory in the quiet war he waged for peace. But as he watched the city below him from the top floor of the USU building, his thoughts turned to the future. There were always more criminals, more chaos, and more people to protect. But as long as he was part of the urban security unit, he would make sure they never made the mistake of messing with the wrong soldier again.